Good evening. Good evening again, I should say. Tonight we're going to start our precept study for this year, for 2025. And I get to launch it. I get the privilege of launching it. I don't know about you all, but there is something very warm and fuzzy that comes up in me when we start precept study every year. With this bunch of people, with all of you that I see on the screen, this is not new material for us. I think we've all encountered this before. And yet there is a returning to it every year that is both inspiring and, at least for me, just really grounding. Like reciting the Kyoji Kaiman for our chant tonight was so sweet just to have those words that just came out. And the precepts are very important to me, and I'm glad that we as a group continue to do precept study every year. So let's launch into the intro. So the precepts in our Zen tradition are the basis of our moral and ethical guidelines. They came out of the Buddhist tradition. They are part of the Zen tradition, and they are the continuation of a long line of different sets of rules and recommendations for how to live an upright life. They're directly linked to the Eightfold Path. They're directly linked to the Buddha's teachings of the Four Noble Truths. They are directly linked to answering this question of how do we address suffering in life? That is the big Buddhist question, and the precepts certainly help us move into that in terms of how, less of why, but more of how. How do I navigate this life? How do I get through my day-to-day in such a way that is in alignment with the Buddha's teachings? So, and then we have the precepts. We have the 16 Bodhisattva precepts. And these consist of the 3 refuges, the 3 pure precepts, and the 10 grave precepts. So that's what makes up that set of 16. And when we recite the Kyoji Kaiman, that's usually our most pithy arrangement of the precepts. We recite it as a chanting practice. And there's many commentaries on the precepts. So Robert Aitken has some, Zen Mountain Monastery has some. There's a variety of commentaries on the precepts that will sort of explain and expound in a practice-oriented way. And we'll be doing a little bit of our own commentary when we take turns sharing how we work with the precepts, how we look at them, how we envision them, how they show up in our lives, where we get caught, where we find them to be supportive. And we'll be doing that over the next several weeks. So the Kyoji Kaiman has a beautiful introduction to it. It speaks to contrition, the refuges, the pure precepts, the 10 grave precepts. And each of the 10 grave precepts has two little paragraphs that are said to be attributed to Bodhidharma and Dogen. Whether or not that's 100% true, I don't know, but that attribution is there. And I want to read a small bit, just a little paragraph from Robert Aitken's The Mind of Clover. And this is in his introduction on the precepts. Aitken writes, without the precepts as guidelines, Zen Buddhism tends to become a hobby, made to fit the needs of the ego. Selflessness, as taught in the Zen Center, conflicts with the indulgence that is encouraged by society. The student is drawn back and forth, from outside to within the Zen Center, tending to use the center as a sanctuary from the difficulties experienced in the world. In my view, the true Zen Buddhist center is not a mere sanctuary, but a source from which ethically motivated people move outward to engage in the larger community. So Aitken brings forward this idea that sometimes the Zen Center or attending this group can be a bit of a place to hide from the world, a place to hide from the things that cause the suffering. And what he's pointing to is that when we take up the precepts as practice, when we let the precepts guide our understanding and our actions, then we can take that ethical action from this place of practice, this place of practicing with Sangha, and take it out into the world. And the idea there being that taking the precepts up as practice may, it's not going to be a guarantee, but may soften some of those difficult aspects of worldly life. I paid my taxes today. I haven't yet figured out. That's not true. I didn't pay my taxes. I filed my taxes today. I haven't yet figured out how the precepts can reduce the frustration of having to pay later. So I'll be looking at that when I start my formal precept practice these next few weeks. Taxes. So one of the things we do with this as a practice to take it up as a practice, and I've started thinking about this for tomorrow, planning my morning, is one of the ways to practice with this, the way that I was taught, the way that my teacher was taught, is to find some time in the morning to recite the Kyojukaimon. It's best if it can be recited out loud so you can both read the words and hear the words being spoken. So we start off our day with Kyojukaimon, and then just let it rest there in our mind as we go about our days, whatever happens during that day. And then in the evening, to give yourself 20 minutes or so to just draw the events of the day through your mind and to notice when or if there is a tightening or a sense of frustration arising or something that just feels like a little bit of a snag or a pull or oh. And these might be instances where action has been out of alignment with the precepts. And there's no judgment there. So in an ideal world, there's not a sense of, wow, I blew it. Really, the practice part of it is noticing, that's where I get caught. And then being able to look out for that in the future. Oh, that's where I get caught. Oh, that's how I feel after I get caught. Or that's how, that's where that karma is coming in. So it gives us a lens through which we can examine our own actions. And actions being both actions of body, speech, and mind. So even thought processes can trigger some of these, like, ooh, I just got caught. So we have our recitation practice in the morning. We have our reflection practice in the evening. And in theory, we would do these throughout the whole time we are engaging in precept study. So we have a number of weeks that we'll be doing this. And so for those weeks, we'll be doing that. I am definitely intending on picking that up as a formal practice. And I'd like to invite you if you'd like to do that as well. It is up to you. But to just put some thought and effort into examining the precepts and really looking at them, at least for me, leaning into the koan aspect of them, because they're not always straightforward, or they can sometimes seem straightforward, but then when you lean in and start looking at some of the subtleties, there's so many layers there. And where do we make our peace with the not just the unknowingness of how to hold them completely, but the overlapping aspects of some of them. So in a way, they can become like questions. You can lean into them, you can discover more, you can go deeper, or you can go more broader, more broad. But there's a way in which, like, there's so much there with which we can engage, with which we can examine and question and look at and read about and talk over with other Sangha members. In one sense, they can be considered a tool in our toolbox of ways to address suffering. But I would say that they're also more than a simple tool. They are a path of practice. So this week at Dharma Ring, the temple that I'm also involved in, they are having their Jukai session this week. So they started precept practice in January, the first Wednesday of January, and they've done precept study throughout the weeks until this week. And morning service, except for Sunday mornings, was the recitation of the Kyojukaimon. And then there were classes on the precepts on Wednesday evenings. And now folks are engaged in a week-long retreat that wraps around taking the precepts formally. And what the ceremony of Jukai is taking the precepts formally and making a public declaration of committing to living as a Buddhist and letting the precepts be a guide. And so we're making a commitment to follow the teachings of the Buddha. This is a ceremony that is optional for people, that it's not required for people, but for some people, it's very important personally to make that public declaration. I know I went through precept study for, I don't know, probably 3 years before I decided I was ready to take the precepts formally. Like being this girl who grew up in Kansas and moved out to Oregon and learned about Zen, and there was no Zen in Kansas when I was living there. There is now, which is great, but there wasn't at the time. It just took me a while to get to that point where I was ready to stand up in front of the Sangha and say, yes, I want to take the precepts formally. And here at Wy'East, we don't do the ceremony of Jukai every year, but we'll do the ceremony of Jukai when people are ready to take Jukai. So I'll always extend an invitation. If someone wishes to take Jukai, then please contact me and we can figure out a time and a way. For people who have already taken Jukai, sometimes just engaging in precept practice is a way to sort of renew those vows that are taken. And if anyone would like to go to Dharma Rain this Sunday and witness the Jukai ceremony there as a way to also renew your own commitments, I believe they will have 21 people taking the precepts this year. And Jyoshin, one of the lay teachers, is the preceptor, so he'll be giving the precepts. I'll be working that day, so I won't be able to be there, but it's such a time of celebration. It's such a time of like all these little baby Buddhas get made, and they're so cute, and people are so excited, and I love it. I love it. So in a way, like what I really want people to take home from this introduction and from the precept study that we do is that these precepts are for you, that whether or not you make a formal commitment to them, like they're a wonderful way to look at your own practice, to look at your own spirituality, to look at your own decision making. Each person is going to have a different relationship to the precepts, and there's not one definition of what is right and what is wrong. So if my practice edge with not killing is houseflies, and somebody else's practice edge of not killing is mice in the kitchen, like one of us isn't right and one of us isn't wrong. We're both leaning into that question of how do we work with the precept of not killing? So these are tools for your practice and not commandments by which you're judged. We tend to be our own harshest judger. I am in a pre-migraine phase, so my words are not working quite right today. Hence my grammar questions. We can judge ourselves harshly. That's what I meant to say. And so as we go through, like looking with the precepts, notice those times when you do fall into, I messed that one up, or I blew that one, or yes, I got it. All of that evaluation is just an extra layer that you're putting on yourself. It's not necessary. But I will say that what you get out of precept practice is also related to what you put into it. So please do spend some time reflecting on these, reflecting on your own practice and how you take your practice out into the world. So we can be beautifully self-reflective and open and full of metta when we're on our cushion or in our chair doing our meditation at home by ourselves. Like in the middle of traffic can be a different experience. So how do we take our precept practice into highway driving or into grocery shopping or into paying our taxes? Like practice is not separate from engaging with the world. And so having these precepts as a bridge between our ideas of upright behavior and how we actually show up in the world can be a beautiful tool. So really that's what I have in terms of an introduction to our precept study. And we've got some time for discussion of just precepts as a whole. I don't want to get too far into individual precepts because I know each of you are taking on a precept or two, and we'll dive deeper into them as the weeks go on. But I just want to start off with perhaps a question to get things started of, like, what is your relationship to precepts? How do you feel about starting our precept study this year? And if you have taken Jukai, what has that meant for you? So any of those places are good places to start our discussion.
For some reason this year, it's feeling different for me. I feel like I'm taking off to the beach tomorrow for a couple days. And one of the things that I want to do at the beach is actually be able to really focus on my precept that I'm going to present. You know, every year I'm at home and I'm in all this busyness of whatever's going on, and then I feel like I'm cramming for my presentation, and I'm trying to pull books out and looking at websites. So I have this different excitement this time about I'm going to be gone for 2 days, and I really have this kind of commitment of trying not to be, I don't want to be reading the news. Everything's so toxic right now. I just need to break away from all of that and have some space in my head for some positive practice. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to take some materials with me. I'm going to sit by the ocean. And I feel like this year it'll even come together really differently than it has in the past because I think one thing that happens every year, almost the same themes, even though we all bring a different flavor to the precepts, kind of the same themes, at least for me, comes up every year. I'm either dealing with the same stuff or I'm feeling like I'm repeating the same stuff when I'm thinking about my precept that I'm presenting or even somebody else's. So I'm hoping that when I go down that something really different will arise for me in preparing my for my precept this time. Who knows? But maybe not having all of the life clutter that you normally do at home. Maybe I'll be able to tap into something new. And then, as far as when I took my precepts, that was a very exciting time for me. It takes a lot for me to make that big of a commitment to something and a lot of thought. And and I was so ready to make that commitment. It just was, I didn't have any doubts about it. Once I got there, I was there. So that's my thoughts to your question. I can't remember. There was a third question. I can't remember what the third question was, but thank you.
Mhm. Well, I'll encourage not just you, Joanne, but I'll encourage everyone as you prepare to present your precepts. Like really hone into the practice aspects of it and really hone into how it shows up in your life. Let these things be personal. Let them be, there can be a vulnerability with sharing your own life or talking about your own life and your own practice. And there is something that can be very connecting when we speak of our life and our practice with others as opposed to something outside of us, what they're doing, what this other person is doing. So I really want it to land as um, your practice. And Joan, going out to the beach and having a very different experience of like one, just shaking up your environment, and two, like having a different way of working with the material can, I'm curious to see what comes of it. And I hope you have a good time at the beach. I can share when I took the precepts for the first time. My sister and brother-in-law were coming in from out of town, and I didn't tell them I was taking the precepts. So my husband at the time had to pick me up or pick them up from the airport. And I came home later after the precept ceremony. And I got there and my sister said, "Where were you? Like, were you at work?" I was like, "No." She's like, "Where were you?" It's like I couldn't, I so wanted to make up some story. Um, but I told them that I took the precepts and I became a Buddhist and was sort of claiming that as part of my identity. My brother-in-law popped up. "I saw 7 years in Tibet. I know all about Buddhism." I'm just like, no, not quite. He teased me about it for quite some time, but it was very sweet.
I'm always excited excited. No, I'm not excited, but I'm always looking forward to our precept study. Um, and I always find something new and interesting in people's presentations and in my own looking at them. I tend to be a contrarian and um, so one way I love looking at them is to find all the ways where um, you would break a precept in a compassionate way. So, or yeah, so, all the times when it might be better to bend the precept, not break it, I guess. But anyway, um, I was thinking about when I took the precepts and like Choan, it wasn't really a big decision. It was just like, how soon can I do this? And I will say there was an element of there's a little ego element because I was proud to say I was a Buddhist, and I wanted the what special thing, the Wagesa, and but yeah, I just and so then I felt like I was more of a Buddhist than people who hadn't taken the precepts. So I had to work with that too. But I just liked being identified with this tribe.
Yeah.
Um, and it felt a little bit like a marriage ceremony in some ways to take these public vows.
Keiko, can I show our photo from Precepts?
Yeah,
Is that are you guys interested in this?
I love that photo so much.
Let's
Except there's
see.
one person in it who was like my best friend who doesn't speak to me anymore, so that's really sad.
Let's see if this works. Oh, hold on. Gotta change my permissions.
Well, you're looking for it. One of my highlights was when the carpet caught on fire.
Wasn't that a moment? I mean, because it was right when we said when the flames are fanned by the Buddha's influence and the carpet caught on fire.
Like, oh my God.
Oh my God. I
Love it.
think Yokoko was there that time, right?
When was that?
Well, we were upstairs at hospice and and the rug
I
caught on.
watched that. I
Yep, and
watched that little
we were
coal
doing
drop onto the carpet.
the ceremony and but was it when I took Jukai or was it when I took my teacher? I think it was when I
It
took
was
my precepts. It was
uh,
Jukai,
it
right?
was Jukai, yeah.
That was Jukai. And the and the charcoal, the incense charcoal
But,
swung over on the carpet and it was smoking.
and
And
nobody blinked, and I was like, why aren't people more worried about this? But it was a bunch of Buddhists, and they were going to just, be very calm about it.
mm,
Look at us, how cute.
love it.
Aw. What's going on with Bukai? She looks like she's,
These all, did you all take Jukai at the same time? I mean,
yeah,
it's a group of people.
this is one pod.
Neat.
Look at Thomas. Looks so
Nobody told me what a bad hairstyle I had. I had it for a while.
Is that Kyogen?
mm-hmm.
I assume so, yes.
Wow.
So sweet. I love that.
Wow.
Mm.
I think, I've gosh, it's been a long time, but I think Joan and I took our Jukai ceremony at the same time. Is that right? Did we do it at the same time? Okay. Um, and I think the way that I came about for me was, um, I think it was kind of like a last minute decision, literally like kind of a split minute decision. It was like it was offered, and I just immediately kind of decided I was going to do the ceremony. And but it was like it was exactly what I needed to do. Like it was so um yeah, so it was great. And it was a beautiful ceremony. It was really nice. Um and I do remember the carpet catching kind of I vaguely remember it. I mean, I think I was kind of just so into this, just kind of I was a little bit freaked out, and just because you're taking vows and it's very serious, and so I was sort of in that moment, and then I kind of like the whole carpet on fire thing. It was just like, wait, what? So I kind of forgot about that actually until you said something. Um, and and then I just remember the next day I like blew off the handle for something. Like I just got really mad and flew off the handle about something, and I just was like, oh well, that's great. I just had this beautiful Jukai ceremony, and I'm the same person as I was yesterday. So,
That
but
that
it was interesting.
that is not uncommon, Lonnie,
Really?
to have, yeah, there's something about sort of doing this focused effort towards taking the precepts or becoming a disciple, like just doing these little stages that oftentimes afterwards there is like a sense of release or the pressure's off and all sorts of nonsense comes bubbling up. And so I don't think it's just you. I appreciate that story, but I also like want to say that that is not uncommon.
Good. That makes me feel better actually. I did kind of judge myself for I don't know, like I'm supposed to be this Buddhist, and you know, and then yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
different
it
ways
was
to
great.
define a Buddhist, and taking the precepts is one of them.
It's interesting though because it's sort of a lesson. I mean, it just shows that it's just I mean, you know, it's just I guess it kind of helped also just the whole idea of taking the precepts. Um, that moment in meditation where you just realize you're thinking about something else and then you come back to meditating. It's kind of like was that kind of a moment where you're just like, oh, okay, just sort of you wake up for a second. And, yeah. Anyway.
I
Yeah,
I
it
thought
does.
that taking the precepts helped my behavior because I'm a Buddhist, and people, I mean, I don't go around announcing it, but anybody who knows me, starts to become obvious because there's Buddhist stuff all over my house. And so, in a way, I don't want people, if I behave badly, I don't want people to think that that's how Buddhists behave, you know? Same with being a lay disciple. I didn't want people to think that that's how a student of Kyogen would act if I acted badly.
That makes me really nervous. Because I'm always raising hell. And they know I'm a Buddhist. And they probably go, that's how Buddhist acts. And I know that, but it doesn't stop me from raising hell. I constantly am. So I
Do
don't know.
you judge the entirety of Catholicism by the actions of one Catholic,
No.
or the entirety of Hindus by the action of one Hindu?
No. Good point. I will remember that.
And then we put a lot of stress on like the importance of authenticity and transparency. So the idea isn't to like put on a mask of good Buddhist or put on a mask of good behavior, but it's to really let these actions shape who you become. And so at that point, it's like you're being poured into the precepts. And there is no right way to hold them. And there is no, every now and then in certain places in Zen, you'll hear little fragments of holding them perfectly. But for the majority of day-to-day life, like, be who you are. Let yourself be formed by these teachings. And like there are many like sets of ethical teachings by a variety of spiritualities, and this is one of them. So if your spiritual path is something else, like engage that fully. Let yourself be shaped by that. But this is the path that has resonated for me in a way that I have completely learned to trust over the years.
Well, Jyoshin, in your intro, you did mention that we tend to be hardest on ourselves, and I would imagine the precepts would be no exception, because it's really not easy if anyone goes a bit deeper than the actual phrases, which seem pretty common: do not steal, do not lie, but to tease it out, each one of us, for what it means for ourselves and our activities, it's quite easy to be hard on ourselves. And that really, in a way, doesn't serve for me. It doesn't serve me. But I like paying attention to action words. And one word that I hear from sometimes Dharma talks is to lean into the precepts, because I can see them as a buttress, as a prop, that it's there for me. It's like the teapot that waits on my counter when I'm at work. You know, it's I mean, that's silly. That just popped into my head, but that's a physical thing. But the precept is kind of on my, pasted on my screen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
I took the precepts a few years back at Keiko's house with Ed, and afterwards, we weren't even out of the driveway before I broke down in tears. And when I got home, I showed the papers to my mom, and I was talking about how touched I was to be so part of something so much larger, because I was showing her the lineage and all the steps back in history, and I cried all over again. And I don't know that she fully got it. But for me, the precepts, when I found them, were like, this is what I've been looking for. This is right. This is what I've always wanted. So for me to take them was more about being sure of the Sangha than it was of them or myself. Because I knew I wanted that as soon as I saw it.
Thank you, Dixie. And Teiko, is it, am I remembering correctly that I'm doing the wrap up as well?
You are.
Okay. Oftentimes during the Jukai retreat, so the retreat that's happening this week at Dharma Rain, oftentimes during that retreat, the preceptor will show the retreatants their transmission silks, which are a version, the paper Kechimiyaku that people receive when they take the precepts is a like a version of that. So Takeo, if you can help me remember when we do the precepts wrap up, if I can figure out how to not have Zoom blur everything out, I will show my Kechimiyaku. Or not my Kechimiyaku, my transmission silks. Just a few minutes left. Are there any last thoughts or last things that want to be shared? Last preparations before we jump into precept study next week. I won't be able to be here for all of the Wednesday evenings. I'll be here for as many as I can, but my work schedule has gotten shockingly strange recently. So I'll be there for some. Anything else that wants to come forward on this topic?
Just gratitude to you for guiding us through this precept study again, with also everything else that you're doing.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me show that photo. That was
It's so sweet. I love it so
was
much.
that 2004?
No, was it?
I think it was 2004.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Put that up there.
Yeah. Abiding in this ephemeral world like a lotus in muddy water, the mind is pure and goes beyond this. We bow to Buddha. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha, prajna, paramita. It's good to see you all tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.